No kidding. Andrea Dworkin, a feminist with a considerable reputation as a writer as well as political activist, believes that women should stop having intercourse.
This is news to me, by the way. This is news. My book, Intercourse, is about the meaning of intercourse to women, the impact of intercourse on women, what it means for women's bodies to be involved in the act of intercourse, and I think then women will decide what to do about intercourse.
Well, what do you think they should decide?
Well, I don't really know. I know now that women aren't deciding. That's what I know. I know that under conditions of inequality or where you have laws that mandate intercourse in marriage, that women are not making choices based on what we want and what our freedom is.
And they're not having any fun along the way.
Studies show that, but my book isn't about that. Studies show that women don't have orgasm from intercourse per se. Many women don't. Most women don't.
But you see, the woman in knowing another person, as we might say, in the biblical sense, women are passive receivers and quite literally invaded and occupied by another body.
I think it's very important to look at what this sex act has meant in a society of male dominance. And what it has meant is that the woman's body is a target that somebody hunts down. It's turned into an object. In male literature, they talk about invading and occupying and violating a woman. And I think that because intercourse is such a normal, everyday activity, we've got to look at what the meaning of that is for us in our lives.
Yes, and you are saying that the meaning is very negative, and therefore you have given yourself the political permission to say out loud that women should consider stopping it.
I have given myself certainly the political permission to begin to ask questions about what is taken for granted about women's behavior every day in a society where we have no social equality.
I'd like to interject something about intercourse.
Jong joins us. Here is Fear of Flying and lots of other titles.
Serenissima.
Serenissima is the one about which we, I assume, are most professionally concerned at this moment. Excuse me, Erica, but Andrea, you did say stop having intercourse, and now you are on television saying that you just want to ask the question.
No, but I never did say it. When I'm against something, people know it. I'm against pornography, all right? I go around this country and around the world saying, stop doing this to women. What I'm saying is, what impact does it have on us that intercourse is the central sex act in our society? You're saying that the impact is bad. I'm saying that it allows us to accept inferiority and makes inferiority synonymous with a certain kind of sexual pleasure.
And therefore we should do what?
What? Yeah? Well, first...
What do you mean?
If it's not available to us, because you said a marriage mandates sex, if the sex isn't at home, he's going to go somewhere else to get it. There's going to be some woman who's going to give it to him.
That's right. There are many women who, for various reasons, have to barter intercourse for economic survival. This is not a good thing. Some of those women are married, and some of those women are on the street.
Erica,
I think it's possible to write a book that's descriptive and not necessarily prescriptive. I think that if you look into the origin of intercourse and examine it in an intelligent way, which Andrea has done, you're not necessarily saying stop all sex. It is possible to imagine the act of sex as a very loving and tender thing between a man and a woman, and it's also possible to imagine it as an invasion. It depends on the society you're in. What she is saying, in a sense, is that in a society that degrades women, intercourse can become degrading.
She's saying
more
than
than
that.
It need not be. I can imagine a society which is loving to women, which is pro-female pleasure, which allows women to be virgins if they choose all their lives, like Joan of Arc, and allows them to be mothers and wives and to enjoy sex fully. I don't think we today have such a society, but I can imagine it, and in my books I try to help create such a society.
Well, do you have any difference at all with Ms. Dworkin?
I disagree that the act of intercourse per se is something that creates the domination of women. I think that's the old biological argument which the male chauvinists used to give us. At the beginning of the second wave of the feminist movement, it was the male chauvinists who said biology is destiny. And I find it quite remarkable that a feminist is now saying biology is destiny. And that's where I really disagree with the premise of Andrea's book.
And what I must say is that as far as I'm concerned, that's not the premise of my book. We don't hesitate to interfere as feminists or as women in general with reproduction, which is natural and biological. There is nothing biological that puts intercourse absolutely at the center of everyone's sexual experience all the time. It is one of many possible acts of intimacy.
I feel that you're shortchanging the woman's intelligence.
How's that?
That we have control of our bodies and that we are having intercourse because we enjoy it. We're not being dominated by men. I mean, that's ridiculous.
Well, 80% of the women who responded to Ann Lander's question about whether women liked intercourse or not said actually that they preferred other kinds of lovemaking and that they didn't like intercourse. It's not a scientific sample, but it is America.
You're making intercourse sound like a very violent act that women aren't partaking in, that they're just being a victim of.
I think that it is very often the case that women are exploited in intercourse. And what I would like to see is women look at the way reality is arranged around us so that we will be available for the act of intercourse.
In reality, men and women have different sex organs. Vive la différence. Secondly, men and women should do what comes naturally.
Well, what nature is has been disputed in different societies.
As a father of 2 teenage daughters and a 7-year-old, I've taught my girls from the very beginning that they have to want to have intercourse if they want to, that not to get in a situation where it's a reward for a date or something like that. And so I've taught them to be independent women and make their own decisions and not let society dictate their decisions to them.
But see, then what has to happen is that they have to live in a society that's going to respect their right to make those decisions, and that's not this society.
Yes.
It's becoming the society.
We hope.
Hopefully, if you and your mate or your lover are on the same wavelength and you understand each other, then you do what you want to do. You don't do what he wants you to do or what you want him to do. You do what you both want to do.
Yeah.
I'd like to comment to Ms. Dworkin. I think that what I'm hearing is that your views in this book are reflective of your own personal experiences.
Actually, that's not true. The book is about, the first part of Intercourse is about the work of several very great male writers whom I deeply esteem, and about what they wrote and thought about intercourse. And their views are very complex, sometimes very ambivalent, sometimes very violent. They often say that when they commit an act of intercourse, they are committing an act of violence. So I don't understand why male writers and male thinkers have the right to think about what is this act, what does it do, and women are supposed to come out and say I'm for or against.
The material that you're interpreting is material that comes out of a deeply patriarchal culture. Yes. You're not interpreting material that comes out of a woman-loving culture. And I can imagine a culture that was woman-loving in which sex would be deeply satisfying to women. And I think there are people out there who have relationships in which their needs are taken into account, in which their pleasure is taken into account, and in which they experience intercourse as something giving and nurturing, not as an invasion. Are there people out there who experience intercourse as giving?
Audience, I assure you.
I mean, that is a possibility.
My question is...
I agree with that.
How do you what?
My question is, how do you conclude that most women do not have orgasm?
Actually, because there have been several studies done on the relationship between intercourse and orgasm.
Well,
and
how do you
You're
equate...
a brave man engaging in this.
How can you equate that with the problem that they're not concerned about universally, that we're having a world population explosion?
I think that the reality is that many women have sex under circumstances that they don't choose. It's an economic reality because we make less money than men. It's a reality when we look at the statistics of sexual violence in our society, and it's a reality in many marriages. Thus, we have the newly defined crime of marital rape.
Are you there, caller? Go ahead.
Hello?
Yes.
I remember when my dad had his talk with me about sex. And to this day, I will never forget his words. He described pushing the woman's arms to the side, using my knees to separate the woman's knees, and it literally chilled my heart listening to that.
You understand Miss Dworkin's point.
I agree completely with Miss Dworkin.
Is it possible that out there we really have mutually consenting adults, considerate of each other's feelings, and partaking in this basic human entitlement?
Are you asking me?
Yeah.
I don't think there are that many people sharing that way.
Andrea, here's what you told our senior producer. I wanted to examine the meaning of intercourse in a society where women are not equal, and what I found was that intercourse is an act to express domination and hostility toward women. It's an instrument of exploitation.
Yes, and I think the key words there are dominance and hostility, and also that it is in a social environment of male power over women. And that's why, when I say I agree with Erica, this is a true agreement. I mean, feminists in our various ways have been working very hard to try to create an egalitarian society in which sex is not a weapon against women.
Well, let's try to imagine what that society would be like, a society in which sex were not a weapon, but sex was a mutual pleasure and a joy and a bond between couples. Where I disagree with the book is that I would like to see such a society created. I would like to stress the possibility of that positiveness and love. It's not that I don't say that there is rape in our society and that sex cannot be used violently, and it often is. But I would like to explore the possibility of a newly feminized culture in which sex could be really beautiful.
Yes.
I believe that there are plenty of couples around who engage in this kind of sex that you're talking about, but you're not being fair to the majority of the couples, and especially the men who are very warm, loving, caring.
Most men are warm and loving.
Yes, absolutely, and I think you're talking about a percentage, but not, that's right. So you get your voice in, and you know, you have a right to say that. But think about us, too, who enjoy it.
If you're saying most men are warm and loving, that's fine, but if women are afraid to admit when they're in a relationship, when they're being abused, why is it so much different that women are going to be in a relationship when they're being forced into sex that they're not enjoying or not, you know, if they can't admit one thing.
Do you agree that most men are warm and loving and generous?
I'm not sure I do.
I believe what you're saying.
Yeah, hang on one second.
Warm and loving, I don't know. You coined the term zipless encounter.
Thank you.
You can't say on the air, right.
Which was real popular in the 70s. How do you account for that? That didn't have much to do with warm, loving relationships.
In Fear of Flying, I described the fantasy of the zipless you-know-what, as we say on television, or zipless encounter. I described it as a fantasy. I described it as the fantasy of sex with an anonymous stranger, and it was very much a fantasy in the book. Isadora, at the end of Fear of Flying, is offered the chance to have an anonymous encounter. She doesn't take it. What Fear of Flying was about was the right to be a whole person sexually and to feel your sexual feelings. It was not about recommending promiscuity or notches on bedposts. I believe that the sexual revolution never really happened in America. I believe that we mistook at a certain period of time numbers, sleeping with a lot of people, for true sexuality. Sleeping with a lot of people is not true sexuality. You can have bad mechanical sex with 1,000 people. True sexuality is being open to your feelings and your fantasies, having a free flow of feeling, a free flow of emotion, loving, caring, and being in touch with your body and your mind.
Is it possible for a woman to have
freedom, and we have never had a sexual revolution in America, as far as I'm concerned.
Is it possible for a woman to have the kind of...
I think that it is possible.
You think, I
think
there are women
in
out
this
there
society,
who do.
I think it's rare. And I also think that what's interesting about Fear of Flying is the way it was misrepresented in the press. When I read Erica's book and I realized that she was talking about adventure and fantasy and possibilities for women, I had not read anything like that when other people wrote about the book. They wrote about it as if she were an advocate of women being more objectified, more used, and more exploited. And that wasn't true.
Mr. Dworkin, you talk about the society. What are we supposed to do with all these women and men? You're supposed to separate them, send some here and some on this island? That's life.
Well, we are separated, for instance, in the job market, where we're segregated pretty effectively. No, I don't think that we want to live, I don't, in a separate society, but I think that for those of us who care about dominance as a form of hurting people, after all, if you have to experience dominance, somebody's dominance over you, in your own body, which is why this question of intercourse is so important. Isn't that the most wounding possible way that you could experience?
You see the anatomical reality of intercourse as inherently male-dominant. Do you not?
In a different way.
No, in the book I described, for instance, what intercourse would be if the vagina were understood to be a strong, muscled, all-encompassing organ where the muscles were, I mean, and one man...
That'd be the only way to get equal in
No, but a friend of mine...
I'm trying to understand.
A friend of mine who read it, in the middle of it, a male friend started screaming. I said, why are you screaming? He said, I'm in pain. I said, why are you in pain? He said, the idea that the vagina could be this strong gives me physical pain. I think men are very afraid of women's sexuality. It's men who are weak after intercourse, not women. And I think there's been terrific revenge against women for our sexual stamina and our sensuality.
It's men who are weak after intercourse.
Yes, let's talk about
true.
that.
Bill. You're saying, show me a guy who just did, and I'll show you a guy who can't fight his way out of a paper bag?
They always want to take a nap, you know what I'm saying. Have a cigarette.
Well, now, why is this revealing? What's the point?
It's very revealing. Dr. Johnson said nature has given women so much power that the law wisely gives her little. And that sums up the male chauvinist position. The male chauvinist position is women are so powerful. Women can have babies. Women can have multiple orgasms. Women are very smart. Women are very able to survive the diseases of life and so on. That, therefore, we will bind her hand and foot legally. This is the male chauvinist position, and it does proceed from fear of women's strength. I totally agree with that. Now, how do we go about changing it so that the two sexes can live on this planet in harmony and happiness?
I'll give you a chance to give us your prescription.
I'd like to know your opinion. There are certainly a growing number of women in powerful positions today, corporate positions that speak of power, and they have actual power. Many where there are men who are dominated by these women in their positions. Do these women then, if they have dominance in their job, does that follow through in the sexual relationship that you're talking about?
The reality is that any woman, the minute she walks out on the street, is just a woman. And what happens to her is what happens to every woman. And you can win the Nobel Prize, you can be the president of wherever, and when you walk down the street, you're going to be called names, you're going to be harassed, and you're not physically going to be safe.
In other words, you can't rise above your genes.
Yeah.
Don't you think that there are many women
you can change society so that you can.
For their power? Don't you think there are many women who use sex as a tool?
I think that there are many women who have absolutely had to use sex to survive, and that when it is the only kind of power you have in a society, it is the power that you use.
I'm married, and I would never give up my sexual intercourse.
Well, he doesn't want you to.
I don't want to.
Are you there? Go ahead. Go ahead, caller.
Oh, yes, sorry about that. I was getting into listening to everything. One question, I have two things to say to Andrea. One is, I'm very curious as to all of a sudden how come now? I mean, I remember this when, you know, I was first getting so-called liberated in the 70s. So I'm interested into all of a sudden it seems like you people were sleeping and all of a sudden you woke up. That's the first.
Well, why don't you speak to that? Hang on a minute, Andrea.
Well, I think a lot of times the experience of feminism is that you've been sleeping and then you wake up. For me, I've been asking questions that I think are very hard to ask about men and women's intimate relationships for a long time. But it is true that I did not have the courage to write a book called Intercourse that asks, are men expressing power over women in this act? And in fact, in trying to find a publisher for the book, people said, we don't want to talk about it. It is an embarrassment to the women's movement to even ask this question. And I think that if we can't talk about the normal, everyday experiences of men and women in intimacy, where women, I think, do experience male dominance, that we're not going to get anywhere in facing our problems in society.
Women engage in intercourse all the time. Is it out of free choice, you say, you ask? If not, what are the consequences of this from a human point of view? Men's bodies are able to be penetrated sexually, too, but there are laws to prohibit this act.
Sure.
Why not the same for women?
No, I didn't say why not the same for women. My point there, and it's a very important point, and I ask people to bear with me on this, it's that women are defined as people who can be penetrated in society, and that's the way we're seen. Everywhere we go, that is the way we're seen. That is normal. People will say it's biological. The reality is that men's bodies can be penetrated. The laws against men's bodies being penetrated, however unfair they are, and I think they are, to homosexual men, exist in order to keep men's bodies having an integrity that helps to uphold male power. It is true that my rights stop at the tip of your nose, but in this society, men's rights don't even stop at my genitals, and that's the truth.
You agree?
Well, I think that Andrea is right in that she has asked some very important questions and written a very brave and honest book. I don't agree with her conclusions about a lot of things. I do think that women have less power in this society. I do think that women being penetrated is considered the norm. I totally disagree with her definition of intercourse, because I can imagine intercourse as a nurturing thing in which the woman is receiving something of value and something loving.
Well,
it can be seen from both points of view. She has chosen to see it from that point of view.
You had
from
one more
point of
point
view
you
that
wanted to make,
power
caller.
takes, that power has.
Caller? Hello? Are you there? I want to give you a chance. Go ahead. Hi. You're on the air.
Are you there?
Yeah.
Okay. I just want to say that I agree with Andrea. My sex life or my marriage, I have a calendar that I keep, and every time we have intercourse, I mark it. Every time he has an intercourse, he gets a star. Every time I have an intercourse or an orgasm, I get a star. I can't tell you when my last star was.
Are you saying this? You literally do this?
Yes, I do.
Where do you put the star?
Right next to his initial.
I mean, is it on the wall of the bedroom or something?
It's in my kitchen on the cupboard.
Put it in the kitchen. You hear this audience laughing.
Yes, I do.
No, but this is not funny to you.
No, it's not. The lady that said that she couldn't live without her intercourse in a marriage can have my share.
Want to stand, please?
I just don't think it's a question of intimacy. I think that there should be not emphasis on sex, but where's the compassion? Where's the love? Where's the understanding?
Yeah. What would the caller do about this?
I sleep on the couch now. And when he tells me he wants to go in the bedroom and get a little, I tell him to hurry up because I got housework to do.
Do you have children?
Yes, I do. I have 3, and he has 6 from a previous marriage.
Do you have girls?
I have 1.
You don't want them to lead the life you're leading.
No, I don't.
So what are you going to tell them? How will you ensure that they don't?
That's a good question. I really don't know. My daughter right now is 15 years old. And, you know, I've had my talk with her about the facts of life and everything. I don't want to downgrade sex to her because with the right person it could be all right. I just haven't found the right person yet.
The caller just stuns me with her attitude. It's so obvious why she's not having good sex. You have that kind of an attitude, and you're not a giving, caring person. You're not going to have an orgasm with someone. And to think that you would count that as barbaric.
I think that's so unfair. I think that there are so many women who are so unhappy in their marriages, and our divorce rate bears that out. And the question really is it always the fact that 2 people are incompatible, or is something happening here that is political?
But it takes 2 to tango here.
It
You see,
does?
all right? I mean, if it's...
But she's saying that the male is not only leading the other partner, but he's also not only calling the tune, but conducting the whole orchestra.
Well, I'm saying to the fact, stop the music. Talk to them. Let them know what's happening. I mean, you got to know what turns you on and you got to first know what turns you on before you can tell somebody else what to do, okay?
How many people think it's possible to educate your partner so that your needs are respected?
You mean to tell me over 10, 5 or 10, or even over a year, you can't talk to somebody over a year, 5 or 10 years to tell them what's happening? I can't believe that.
And we'll be back in just a moment. You may call Andrea Dworkin anything you wish, but don't call her boring. This book is a novel titled Ice and Fire. And here is the book Intercourse, which examines the, what shall we say?
The active intercourse.
The active intercourse at the root of our survival as a species. In your judgment, you appear to come very close to saying that it is an inherently male activity, which is, more than that, used as an instrument to control and dominate women. And in that argument, you appear to be saying, as Ms. Jong has already reminded us, that anatomy is destiny.
The problem is that we forget that we live in a society that we've created as social human beings, and that we can change the terms of that society. I don't know what intercourse would be in a world where women were really free, but I do know that it is unlikely that it would be the central sex act in
Andrea,
the society.
This is what I want to know. If you had a society in which women were free, would you necessarily see intercourse as something invasive and intrusive and pounding?
Occupying.
I find it very strange that here we are 14 years into the second wave of the feminist movement, and suddenly a radical feminist like you is giving the argument that people like George Gilder gave 14 years ago. In other words, you're now on the biology is destiny side. I reject that. I believe that we have the power to modify our society so that biology is not destiny, and I believe sex can mean different things in different societies.
I think I just said that.
That it's very pessimistic.
I think I think it's true that the book is a pessimistic book. I think that the book is almost a tragic book, but it's not because biology is destiny. It's because we take whatever it is we feel, and then we say, that's biology, that's natural, that's inevitable, that's the way that it has to be.
Penetration is natural. And I think you see this whole business of male-female architecture as, by its very structure, aggressive male, passive receiving female. And it really looks very much to me like you're calling for a political action of celibacy or denial for most of the women in the Western world whom you perceive to be victimized.
I think that most women would like many, many kinds of acts of sexual intimacy with men. And I think that the real question is, why, when one has sex with men, does that mean always, all the time, intercourse?
It doesn't, though.
And there's nothing natural about that.
It doesn't necessarily. I mean, I don't think that's true.
Yes.
I think there are all kinds of...
attitude going to further the women's movement and feminism? Aren't there more important issues? I mean, not that this isn't important, but is this going to help us get a better job if we
she thinks
stop
it will.
I don't see that.
I think the question is that, I think the reality is, if you're put down because of your sex, you had better examine everything that goes in to making your sexual identity and your sexual status in society, to see what impact that act is having on how you can function in the environment that you live in.
I think that women's consciousness needs to be raised, and I think it's a woman's responsibility to communicate to her partner what she wants and what makes her feel good.
Yes,
and
Ms. Dworkin agrees. She agrees. That does not, however, apparently speak to the point that she's trying to make.
Why is it that we have laws, biblical laws as well as sexual laws, that mandate intercourse as an obligation in marriage? Exactly.
But
because
so
intercourse is an effective act of male dominance.
Then we should change the patriarchal culture, and even sex will be different.
I think Ms. Dworkin is saying that you cannot change this patriarchal culture if you don't see the inherent male dominance embodied in intercourse.
In the act of intercourse, as it is now acted on women.
So if you were Darwin, if you were God, this is not how you would have done it. You sound very much like a person who believes that we have evolved into two sexes to promote the survival of the species in such an anatomical way that the act is inherently female passive and exploitive.
I think that the act of intercourse, frankly, is one of the more polarizing sex acts. And I think that if we had a sexual value system in which what men and women have in common was more what mattered as opposed to what polarized us, we would be a lot better off.
Basically, I think you're taking away a lot of power from women. I think as a liberated woman, you have a choice of saying yes, no, or maybe, or how you like it. And I think as women, we have those choices. And you choose your partner. You're not talking about all men.
I
You
know
can also
an awful
train
lot of women who don't get nearly as much intercourse as they would like.
Yes.
It seems that Mrs. Dworkin is so condescending towards women. They should stand up. If you can't stand up, we can't change society unless women change it themselves and men try and help or take a role to help.
I agree with that.
I'd like to know how many men would honestly admit that once they've had intercourse with a woman, they fell madly in love, whether she was the right woman for them or not.
What do you think?
I think there's a lot. I think they're just as vulnerable as I am.
I agree with that, actually. I think that men are very vulnerable
It's hard for
to the
men-
blandishments of sex, and that men do fall madly in love and become very vulnerable to a woman who gives them pleasure.
Right.
And I don't think it's all a one-way street. In fact, I think the vulnerability of men is so great that they have arranged a society of laws to protect their own vulnerability.
Why then is the rap out there abroad in our beloved?
It's not a rap.
Let me
it's
just
just
let
a
me
question.
the rap is males in far too many numbers are quite satisfied to lay them and leave them.
I don't think that's true. It hasn't been my experience.
What'd you say?
I think that's really changing. I think a lot of men really are looking for intimacy more now, and I think that a lot of men want, equal relationships. I think that's really changing.
I hope you're right.
You know, there's two kinds of marriages. There's the marriage that has sex, and there's the marriage that makes love. God forbid my husband deprives me, he'll never go to work. But, but really, today it's 1987. You don't have to stay married. You don't have to get married. You can live with someone, and it's got to be a two-way street, giving and receiving. And if you feel good, it's both of you should feel good what you're doing.
I'm almost out of time.
A question for Andrea. Are you married or have you been in the past?
I have been, yes. I'm not now.
And we'll be back in just a moment. Hush, Will, says the other. Don't be a frightened puppy. This is Venice. All fevers and contagions breed here. He lifts the woman's heavy head, brings a golden goblet to her lips, and bids her drink. She does. A few gulps go down, but the remainder stains the front of her bodice. I can't read any more of this page. Erica, Jong, weighing in again. I'll tell you what, they won't be upset with me, I don't think, to use the male metaphor. Here are two long ball hitters in literature today. Serenissima. Serenissima.
Which is just a name for Venice.
A Novel of Venice is Erica Jong's entry into what must make her publisher very happy. Are you there? Hi. Hello? Oh, I got to push a button. Sorry. The mine go first. I'm like the president. I have trouble. Are you there? I'm glad you waited. Go ahead.
Hello, Phil. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I want to tell Andrea that she's very angry and lonely. Hello?
Yeah, we hear you.
Okay. The men in the audience surprise me, too, that they haven't defended themselves. I am 29 years old. I've been married 3 times. I had 3 rotten marriages, but in all 3, the sex was great because I was compassionate as far as that went, and my husband's learned by me. I can't understand her. I can't understand
You
her.
had
What's
great
she have
sex,
against
and
men?
you divorced 3 of them.
No, I'm married now, and I'm married to a very wonderful and understanding man.
Yeah, is it, and the sex is good now, too?
Sex is always great.
So
This is your smart woman, and you know how to teach the man what they don't know. Hello,
Well,
Phil? I
yeah,
can't
well,
hear you.
where?
I can't hear you.
Where's your book?
I don't have a book.
Yeah, where are the men? What is this, a bunch of wimps in this audience today? What? Yeah, oh, you're here. That's right. I keep forgetting.
I keep putting my hand up. You know, come to me. First of all, I want to say that a lot of times surveys are taken. I've always taken of people that are injured. You should take surveys of people that are happy. I hug my wife every day when I come home from work. To me, that's the most important thing. Now, all these surveys are women who've been raped, and women who've been beaten, and women who've been treated bad. Where's the survey of the people who've been treated good?
I'll tell you that I think that a lot of feminists have done that. The Height Report, which I'm sure many of you read when it came out over a decade ago, was about what women really felt and thought about sex. It wasn't about being injured. And the outcome of that research, which didn't have the kind of bias you're talking about, was that 7 out of 10 women did not experience orgasm from intercourse. That doesn't mean that they didn't want to be intimate with men. They did. But the question was, why with this act of intercourse?
Do you agree with those numbers, Erica?
No, I don't. From my own personal survey, most of the women I know want sex more than the men.
No, but she doesn't argue that. She's saying that when 10 of them give themselves the opportunity, only 7 of them are not happy about it.
I can't say, you know, what the statistics of the Height Report were. I can only say I've never been in a relationship myself in which I wasn't consistently happy sexually, and I don't know of any woman today who would remain in a relationship in which she wasn't consistently happy sexually. I think that we've changed that.
Yes.
I was just wondering whether or not Andrea's theory differentiates at all between married sex, married love, and a one-night stand.
Well, my theory doesn't, in the sense that my theory isn't about whether intercourse is long-term or short-term. What I'm concerned about is, how does intercourse make women see ourselves and act in society? In terms of marriage, I am very concerned, and a lot of my book is about the way laws arrange intercourse in marriage. In other words, when people are sexual liberationists, one of the things that they're concerned about is that there are laws against certain sex acts. One of the things we don't recognize is that there are also laws that mandate certain sex acts at certain times, and intercourse is the mandated sex act.
Yes. You keep saying that a man penetrates a woman, right? A woman is not biologically equipped to penetrate a man.
That's right.
I mean, you know.
She knows that.
How can you? I mean, you're saying
God, I just found it out.
You appear to be calling for a different anatomy for women.
No, I don't think so. I think that penetration is simply one sexual possibility. And the social question, not the biological question, is why is it considered the central synonym for sexual reality?
Yeah. I just wanted to say that sometimes the woman's on top.
Yes.
Often, in fact.
I wish you'd have chosen another time period to say it.
Is there, Andrea, is there hope for the act of intercourse?
Yes, I think so. I think in a world of some real equality, it can be an act of tremendous intimacy and communication. But I think that, and I will say this to you, at great risk, I think, for myself, I think this audience is being somewhat dishonest. I think you may be the happiest people in the world, but I think that you know that many women are not very happy, and that 80% of women who wrote to Ann Landers are also real women, and they're really talking about their own real lives. Yes. So think about them.
Yes, I think Andrea's taking a beating here because I think she's brought up some important points. And I think if you think this society is ready to change its views, you need to look at teenage pregnancies and why so many male teenagers are walking away from the young women that they're getting pregnant if they don't think that they have the power to dominate them.
And we'll be back in just a moment. Hi, thanks for waiting. Go ahead.
Hello?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, okay. I just want to say that I read a critical review of Andrea's book and really didn't expect to pay her too much attention, and I found that she's saying a lot of important things if people would just listen to her. Whether you agree or disagree or like intercourse or dislike intercourse,
will you do us
the impact of society.
Please do this favor for us. What is it, among many important things that, and Ms. Dworkin thanks you for your support, what is it you hear her saying?
I think she's saying, look at society. Put it back in society. Look what the impact that some of these views have on society.
But the feminists have said that.
But Erica has said, well, how can we make it a better society? How can we become more equal?
Absolutely. That's the question we're asking. We're asking it in different ways, but that is absolutely the question we're asking. And you're absolutely right. The caller is right. Reviews of women's books often trivialize them. Don't take them seriously. If you're a woman out there and you love a certain woman author, don't be put off because you see her book trashed in the media, because women's books are often trashed and trivialized.
But feminist work, such as Ms. Dworkin's, is usually reviewed by a woman. Doesn't make it wonderful.
A woman can be just as misogynistic as a man. In a misogynistic society, women are misogynistic too. That's one of the points we've been trying to understand. So you have to really search your own heart. I think what Andrea is doing is raising important questions. I think her book is descriptive, not prescriptive. And I honor and admire her attempts to raise these questions. And I think she's very courageous. I don't agree with all her answers.
Yes, ma'am.
Excuse me, I do agree with Andrea's because sex do have to be controlled. Because a lot of young girls have been having sex and have kids which they cannot support. And people do have to understand, Andrea, on how they feel about sex.
Yes, ma'am.
I don't understand what happened to the word no and a woman controlling what she believes and wants to do.
How would you respond to that briefly, please?
Two things. First of all, in marriage, religious women, for instance, aren't allowed to say no. Secondly, in a society, in a society where men have power and the word no is consistently interpreted to mean yes, we don't have the authority to make our no stand.
If you're saying that our society, the sexual intercourse that's happening in our society now is so terrible, what are you telling young people to do to change it in the future?
I really hope that young people who are growing up in a state of emergency, as you know, because of AIDS, I mean, we don't know what's going to happen to young people around sexuality. They're going to have to start all over, see? They're going to have to start all over, trying to understand and create equality in sex with each other.
Okay, what tragic thing happened in your life that made you feel this way?
You're not put off by the question you've been asked.
No, what puts me off is that when we read the work of male writers, they can have had terrible and tragic lives, and we read their books for what they give us. I want you to read my book for what it can give you, and forget about me and just read the book because the book matters.
Yeah, but you cannot write this kind of material and not be at least open to the understandable natural curiosity that ensues because of the material, the arena in which you are professionally operating.
I really wish that when I was growing up, people had asked Norman Mailer these questions. They had said to him, "Excuse me, sir, you stabbed your wife. Do you think that that has some kind of impact on why all these women are hurt in your books?"
I think there's another very important thing we should look at here. I think our society is going through a huge anti-sex convulsion. I don't agree with Andrea that America is pro-sex. I think America is deeply anti-sex, has been since its founding. And I think now we are using the AIDS plague, which is really tragic, as an excuse to turn away from sexuality, to say sexuality is no good. And I think before we're through, we're going to see a return to virginity and to the bundling board, to technical virginity like we had in the 50s, and nobody will have orgasms at all anymore, neither men or women. I think that we're really in the grip of this.
Yeah.
And I think we really have to look at it and what that means.
Well, let's take a break here. I want to sit down. I'm not sure about you. And rest, and we'll be back in just a moment. Incidentally, Ice and Fire is a novel, and it is about exploitive love.
It is about women on the streets, it's about prostitution, and it's about what happens when you're very poor and you have to sell your body for sex.
Are you there, caller? Go ahead.
Yes, I just want to address myself to a point that Miss Jong made. As much as I admire her and both Miss Dworkin, I have been married for 17 years. I celebrated my 70th anniversary in January of this year. I'm a college-educated professional woman from the Midwest, and it is only now through therapy that I am beginning to acknowledge my participation in the sex role and to be able to acknowledge what my needs are. I have been in a marriage for 17 years and been unable to do that.
I think it's marvelous that you're able to do it. And I think one of the reasons that we're writing books is to help women to be freer to ask for what they need.
Are you mad at your husband? Honestly. Honestly now.
No, I think he is simply a victim of this society as much as I am.
But it sounds to me like you went to a therapist and he helped you decide that all these years you've been miserable.
No, he didn't. I went to the therapist because I had been miserable all these years. I grew up in a home that was dominated by my father, and I think that's part of the problem. Male dominance was inculcated in me. I didn't know how to say no. I didn't know how to say what I wanted.
I understand. Yes, ma'am.
I think if everybody was really honest, they'd admit that 50% of the people like chocolate better.
You do? So sex is not everything.
I'd like to ask Andrea.
I don't have much time.
Is she celibate?
Yeah.
Yes.
I'd like to ask you if it's not too personal. Are you celibate?
It is too personal. I don't want to answer it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'd like to say, first of all, I think you're giving men too much strength, and you're really discounting the intelligence
Now,
and
what would
the
you say to
strength.
this woman? Here's a very honest woman on the phone, 17.
I think it's a male-female thing. I think she's just someone who realized that she's not happy, and they're working it out together.
Yeah.
I think often the people who have the power over us are people we choose to give the power.
Yes. Yes.
Amen.
How many people have sex problems that have nothing to do with sex? Maybe it was the way they were raised. Maybe it was something that happened to them. It has nothing to do with their husband or their boyfriend.
Yes. You want in? Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
Often you can teach men how to be intimate, but it's a lot, for me, it's been a lot of hard work, and it's felt like intimacy and intercourse are in two different camps, and the only thing in common is the letter that the words begin with.
Uh-huh. I think I understand you, and I'm afraid to really explore it. But
What were some of the black male responses when you interviewed people? Because black males don't dominate this society.
No, they don't dominate the society. And in fact, a lot of what's used to hurt them is the view that their sexuality is both exaggerated and they're characterized as rapists. And one of the things that I try to do in Intercourse is to look at the sexual dimension of racism and how race is turned into a kind of sexual hatred.
And we'll be back in just a moment. The essence of female oppression is rooted in nothing less than the act of sexual intercourse itself. Says, among other things, the jacket to on Andrea's book titled Intercourse. You might want to take it home in a brown paper bag. Depends on where you live. Serenissima is the title of Erica Jong's novel, sir.
You know, now
Services provided and promotional fees paid by the following.
Hey, Andrea, if the majority of the women in the country have the right to vote, right?
All
Do you want
women
to change
have
them?